Canto, chapter 15, text 20. Please repeat. Anye, cha, mayino, mayam, antardhan, anam, adbhuta, atmanam, mayam, prakalpya, vatsam, te, dudur, dharanamayim, anye chamayino mayam, antardana adbhutatmanam, mayam prakalpya vatsam se pratsam te, dudur dharanamayim, anye chamayino mayam, antardana adbhutatmanam, mayam prakalpya vatsam te, dudur dharanamayim,
anye chamayino mayam, antardhan adbhutatmanam, mayam prakalpya vatsam te, dudur dharanamayim,
anye chamayino mayam, antardhana adbhutatmanam, mayam prakalpya vatsam te, dudur dharanamayim,
anye chamayino mayam, antardhana bhutatmanam, mayam prakalpya vatsam te, dudur dharanamayim.
Ladies. Anybody else? Word by word. Anye, others. Cha, also. Mayinaha, mystic magicians. Mayam, mystic powers. Antardhana, disappearing. Adbhutam, wonderful. Atmanam, of the body. Mayam, the demon named Maya. Prakalpya, making. Vatsam, the calf. Te, they. Dudu, milked out. Dharanamayim, proceeding from will. Translation on purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Others also, the inhabitants of the planet known as Kimpurusha Loka, made the demon Maya into a calf, and they milked out mystic powers by which one can disappear immediately from one another's vision and appear again in a different form. Purport. It is said that the inhabitants of Kimpurusha Loka can perform many wonderful mystic demonstrations. In other words, they can exhibit as many wonderful things as one can imagine. The inhabitants of this planet can do whatever they like or whatever they imagine. Such powers are also mystic powers. The possession of such mystic power is called Ishita. The demons generally learn such mystic powers by the practice of yoga. In the Dashama Skanda, the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a vivid description of how the demons appear before Krishna in various wonderful forms. For instance, Bakasura appeared before Krishna and his cowherd boyfriends as a gigantic crane. While present on this planet, Lord Krishna had to fight with many demons who could exhibit the wonderful mystic powers of Kimpurusha Loka. Although the inhabitants of Kimpurusha Loka are naturally endowed with such powers, one can attain these powers on this planet by performing different yogic practices. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyade Shatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sri Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Once again the verse. Anyacha mayino mayam antardhanat bhutatmanam mayam prakalpya vatsamte duduhurdara namayim. Others also, the inhabitants of planets known as Kimpurusha Loka, made the demon Maya into a calf, and they milked out mystic powers by which one can disappear immediately from another's vision and appear again in different forms. Hare Krishna. So we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a very interesting section where all kind of different groups of living entities, or you could say interest groups, transform some of their prominent personalities into a calf to induce Mother Earth to provide something. So not only milk, but Mother Earth can produce, like in this case, mystic powers. Or before, what was it? They acquired the art of flying in the sky. Then the Gandharvas acquired sweet musical art and beauty, and so on. So there is this famous story in the Ramayana of Vishvamitra and Vishvavasu. And there, I always mix them up. Who was who? Who was a Brahmana all the time and who became a Brahmana? Somebody knows? Vishvamitra he was a Kshatriya before, right? Okay, so Vishvamitra, very powerful Kshatriya, and he became envious because he saw the power of the Brahmanas. You know, so the Brahmanas are so powerful, and how he saw it? He saw it in Surabhi cow that this Brahmana had, and with this, and like to keep the story short, with this cow, this Brahmana was able to manifest a whole army even to defeat him. You know? So he was like, I need one of those cows. You know? It's very practical. You know? You just take one cow and then you just manifest the army, you conquer, and then you move on. You know? So he thought he should become a Brahmana. And he managed to actually become a Brahmana. And he was a little bit, you could say, I would say in German we say größenwahnsinnig. He had too big plans, and he created his own planet, and then he couldn't maintain it in orbit. So Brahma had to come in to help him. But the point is that the mystic powers are, you could say, the ability to manipulate matter, in a certain way. And mother cow, especially in the form of Surabhi cow, is considered to be similar, like in the spiritual world, all the trees are desire trees. The Surabhi cows can manifest also anything. And usually, of course, Brahmins have a Surabhi cow, so they have unlimited amounts of ghee, so they can perform yajna. The residents of Kim Purusha Varsha are described here. They transformed Maya into a calf. So somebody knows Maya? Who knows? Not Maya Devi, but Maya the demon. There's a few stories with him. And one very famous story with Maya is that he became the architect of the palace in Indraprastha. You might have heard. Maya, I forgot exactly what favor Arjuna and Krishna saved him. I think they saved him from this Agni fire. And therefore, Maya was very grateful. So he said, so anything you want, I'm at your service. So they said, well, we need a new palace, in Indraprastha. Please, could you design it, build it, So Maya actually is a very powerful mystic architect, you could say, Maya Dhanava. And he built this incredible building. And this building was filled with mystic traps, you could say, or visual illusions, but of a very high quality. And in the Mahabharata, there are all kinds of very detailed descriptions that actually this palace, because it was commissioned and performed or commissioned to Maya Dhanava, all kinds of rakshasas and yakshas were guarding the gates, So it was even it was the palace of the Pandavas. The yakshas and rakshasas were the Dwarapalas, of this palace. So very good palace. And when Duryodhana came to visit, he fell into each and every trap. That's a famous story. He thought it's floor, but it was not floor. It was actually water. He thought it's a wall, but actually it's a way through. He thought it's a door, then it actually was a wall, and so he embarrassed himself, and Draupadi laughed at him, and of course the consequences became later, visible in the game of dice again. But this palace is described in great detail. How actually Maya Dhanava was even a better architect than Vishvakarma himself. So Vishvakarma is the architect of the Devatas, and Maya Dhanava is the architect of the demons, actually. And he was actually better. He was really good. So what's interesting also in this section is that nobody is excluded. It's not that because somewhere here also were the Rakshasas, no, were the Kandharvas, Pitriloka, Indra, the sons of Diti, the Asuras, they transformed Prahlad, into a calf, because Prahlad is the best, among them, they also know. And they produce liquor and beer, liquor and beer. Like the Devatas, they have Somarasa. It says the Asuras, demonic people, have liquor and beer to intoxicate themselves. So basically, Mother Earth is providing for everybody. Mother Earth is providing for everybody, and she's not distinguishing, who is coming. Everybody has different needs, different inclinations, different wants, and actually Mother Earth provides for everybody. Or indirectly, Prithu Maharaj is providing for everybody, because Prithu Maharaj made sure that Mother Earth was willing and ready to give. First of all, his main concern was grains, and food for the general population. But then everybody else got a chance to also milk Mother Cow and gain all kinds of abilities or items that they required. And this might seem, you could say, counterproductive, because why would you give beer and liquor to the demons? Dangerous. But actually, if we read the Bhagavad Gita, we can understand that the Vedic philosophy and also in the Bhagavad Gita, the idea is not that we want to necessarily, as the main idea, try to change everybody to something which they are not. Or in other words, Krishna says, do not disturb those who are in ignorance. So that's very interesting. So he says, do not disturb those who are in ignorance. Do not go and tell them, you are an illusion, you are in Maya, you're not this body. So basically everything we're doing. And the interesting thing is that Krishna, in the purport, contradicts Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada contradicts in the purport Krishna. So he says, Krishna says, do not disturb those who are in ignorance. Basically, you have a free will, you decide what you want to do, and I give you knowledge, the opportunity is there, but ultimately, those who are really in ignorance, don't disturb them. They will not be able to appreciate, most probably. And it's a very important lesson to generally know, that there's no need to, or you could say it in a different way. If somebody asks a question, it's a very good opportunity to explain something. But if somebody is not asking a question, then don't go there and give them the answer, So, not necessarily. But Srila Prabhupada says that the devotee takes the risk. There is a risk involved, in disturbing those who are in ignorance, They might overreact, So Srila Prabhupada says that the devotee takes that risk because he understands the heart of Krishna. So Krishna is liberal, but in his heart he would of course prefer that everybody is Krishna would prefer that everybody is conscious, of their ultimate identity, would prefer that people are not wandering in samsara and suffering in this world. So, but Krishna is impartial, so he doesn't want to force himself on anybody, So therefore he says, those who are in ignorance, don't disturb them. But a devotee takes the risk, Prabhupada says, And he gives actually the example of Jesus Christ. He says Jesus Christ, he took the risk and he was crucified. And once Srila Prabhupada also said that if people, or I don't know if he said people, I don't know the exact phrase he said, but he said more or less in the context, he said, if people would know what I'm doing, they would crucify me also. Because he was, preaching against democracy, for example, So that's like, you can't do that, That's very not politically correct, Democracy is the very, very best, We had enough bad experiences, So democracy is the epitome of, political evolution, and anybody who threatens democracy is, very dangerous. But Srila Prabhupada was preaching, so it's demon crazy, he called it sometimes. And he said that actually the ideal situation is to have a Raja Rishi, to have a saintly king, So a king who actually is not a tyrant, who misuses his power, but like Bhaktivinoda Tirtha Maharaj often talks about the benevolent tyrant, So the king has to be a tyrant, in the sense that he is imposing laws, rules, might be even, killing people, speaking death sentences. But if the ruler is a benevolent ruler, then he will do it according to the law, according to Dharma, ultimately. And so the question is, what is the problem with democracy? The democracy is good as long as the people who elect and the people who are elected are good, And a dictatorship is good as long as the people who are in power are good. So it is, and there's one famous example in which is quite recent, and that's in Singapore. Because when people think of the dictatorship, usually people think of, I don't know, Iraq or Libya or something, or Hitler, the original dictator. All dictators afterwards, they try to fashion themselves in a similar way. The only problem is they don't have Hugo Boss to make the uniforms for them. So the example of Singapore is very interesting because Lee Kuan Yew, he was a dictator, but he made Singapore from a very poor country into the wealthiest country in the equator. So it depends on the quality of the leader. There's plenty of democracies which are absolutely corrupt, inefficient. Nobody takes responsibility. Because when there's a parliament, it's like, who's responsible? You elected us. Something like that. It happens again and again. So, like that, Srila Prabhupada, talked about many different things that might be politically not correct or controversial, but there was a reason for it, and he took the risk. He took the risk to talk. You could say, without a filter, and mainly also because, of course, he basically discouraged modern civilization. He discouraged all the modern advancements as not actually really that good. He questioned, that actually this modern civilization, as it stands with its motor cars and tall buildings and exploitation and burning of oil, it's actually not the epitome of civilization. Maybe civilization is something else. And there is this very famous meme that maybe you have seen, where there is a picture of a sadhu, with dreads, and big tilak, and the question is, primitive or civilized, So at first sight he looks primitive, It's like wearing just like a piece of cloth, Maybe even, like in Vedic times, or like in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 8th canto, we hear the description of a brahmachari, So the brahmachari nowadays, has an iPod, or iPhone, AirPods, shaved nicely, with Gillette, and nice jute dhoti, The brahmachari in the Bhagavatam is described, he has long matted hair, and the way you take care of your matted locks, is with cow dung, cow dung, you put cow dung in it, And they live in the forest, and don't cut your nails, don't cut your hair, so very long hairs, and they're wearing tree bark, and he's carrying a lota, that's all he has, So it might seem uncivilized, Or another example, of course, are the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, who slept every night under a different tree, we hear, Every night a different tree, because they didn't even want to be attached to a tree, If you sleep too long under a tree, you might start, putting a nail, hanging your coat or something, and, building something around the tree. So they would change the tree every night. So it might seem uncivilized, that they're living in such a, barren place and without a roof. But the six Goswamis of Vrindavana, they are the most prolific writers, during their time. Especially Jiva Goswami. I forgot exactly how many verses in total he wrote, but I think the Satsandarbha alone has, how many? Like 400,000 verses or something? I forgot the exact numbers, but thousands and thousands of verses, So obviously a very civilized person, with a lot of knowledge, and deep understanding of not only material reality, but also spiritual reality. The six Goswamis of Vrindavan were also a famous example. How does it go? Apriyo. I forgot the words, but they were approached by everybody. All the villagers nearby, they would go to the six Goswamis of Vrindavan and ask for, advice. And even the dacoits who used to live in Vrindavan, when they had a problem, they went to Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, to help them. So everybody could understand that they are the ultimate leaders, and they were not partial. Similar like here also, Mother Cow is not being partial, towards the good and the bad. So the question is, what is civilization? So civilization, ultimately, of course, is a change of consciousness. How we deal with the world, how we perceive the world. Civilization is not, like Prabhupada says, living in a high-rise or in a building, having a big bed, maybe a water bed, big LED TV, that's not necessarily civilization. Civilization is a question of character, you could say, much more, than a question of material achievements. So yes, Srila Prabhupada questioned all of this, and of course, sometimes it seems like a long way, to be able to implement the ideals that Srila Prabhupada talks about. Because if you read, I don't know, like most young devotees have a wake-up moment when they read the Nectar of Instruction. Like there's a saying among young devotees or brahmacharis, until you read the Nectar of Instruction, you can feast as much as you want. Once you read the Nectar of Instruction, you realize maybe I should be a little bit more austere. Srila Prabhupada there says that if you go to a grihasta's place, with the wish and desire to enjoy food, even it's prasadam, it's not prasadam, because your desire is to only enjoy the food. Prasadam is when you understand this is the mercy of the Lord and you honor it. If you're just devouring without consciousness, it might not act as prasadam. Not in the same way, maybe. It is still prasadam, of course. There's always a benefit. But there is also a difference of, similar like when we chant the holy names, when we are innocent or, unknowing, ignorant. When you hear the holy names for the first time, you might experience what is called namabhasa. So actually you might become quite happy and ecstatic by chanting the holy names, even you're not very advanced. And then we start chanting, and then we fall back into the stage of Namaparada. And then it takes quite some time to again reach Namabhasa, the shadow or the semblance of the holy names. And this principle applies to many things, also prasadam. So the first time you get prasadam, it's prasadam and it's amazing, and you can, Prabhupada said, you should take as much so you walk out like a duck out of the prasadam room. But then there is the point where you should understand, actually, I should control my tongue still, And if I really want to taste prasadam, I have to become really conscious. This is Krishna himself, It's not just food, We understand that prasadam, like many other items in the service of Krishna, is Balaram himself. In the spiritual world, prasadam is Balaram, and also in this, so everything we have in relation to Krishna, we know the Midranga is Balaram, but also prasadam is Balaram. So, like that. Okay, let me see. I'm a little bit tight with time today, but maybe there's some other point we should shortly talk about. Generally, you could say that having mystical powers can be achieved by yoga. You know, Ashtanga yoga is, you know, we could say a natural side effect. And in traditional, in the Yoga Sutras, even Patanjali himself explains that while the effects of practicing Ashtanga yoga leads to siddhis, you know, actually they are a distraction. You know? So this is because some schools of yoga might specifically aim to gain siddhis, you know, but ultimately even the mystical paths of yoga, they warn, you know, you might get these mystical powers, but that's not the ultimate aim, you know, of yoga. You know? But it is possible, you know, to attain the ashtasiddhis of, you know, moving items or transforming the body, like it says here. This the Kimpurusha, they are able to change their shape, you know, as they want, you know. So the word Kimpurusha means, and Krishna gave once a long lecture about it, but Kimpurushas are like, Purusha means human or person or male, you know, and Kimpurusha, it seems he's a human, but no, you're not sure if it's a human. It might be something else, you know. Shapeshifters, you know. I just saw this clip on YouTube of this Chinese, very ancient tradition. They can change their mask. You might have seen it. It's not an AI, you know, video. They're real. They have this different masks. They can change really fast, you know. So the mask comes, then their face comes, and different mask comes, you know. So that's maybe like a Kimpurusha representation, you know. This, of course, is a trick. But the Kimpurushas actually, by mystical powers, can change the shape of their body, you know. And Srila Prabhupada gives the example of the 10th canto, all the different demons who appeared in front of Krishna in the shape of a crane, of a bull, of a horse, you know, of a tornado, you know. So many different demons, and they all had mystical powers, you know. So in general, you could actually say, if you read the Puranas, the Bhagavatam also, we understand that actually those with a demonic tendency, they want mystical powers, you know. They're very much inclined to have mystical powers. And Srila Prabhupada says in many other places that a devotee, similar like it's mentioned in yoga, as a side effect, you have mystical powers, you know. And in yoga, there is a direct warning to not be distracted by the mystical powers. You know? And a devotee might not be even, like Satyananda Maharaj once said, there's a description that those who are, what's it? Who remembers this? There was one Prabhupada disciple who saw Srila Prabhupada walking on light rays. Have you heard the story? Yes. So there's a description. Yeah. No, light. So there's different mystical powers. You can travel by water. You know? So it's known that the yogis, when the actual yogis, they don't travel by Indian railways to the Kumbh Mela. You know, the real yogis, they jump into Gangotri and come out in Devprayag. You know, they can travel through water. You know? And there's also mystical power. You can, when there's a light ray coming into your room, you jump on the light ray and you travel through light rays, you know. And I forgot who it was. Satyananda Maharaj tells the story for sure very often. But one Prabhupada disciple, you know, was looking through the keyhole, and Prabhupada was walking on the light ray, which was coming into his room. There's a few stories like that. And Srila Prabhupada was not his main, you know, show, you know. Or Prabhupada was also asked directly, you know, what is your mystical power, you know? Jesus walked on water, you know, made manifest bread, you know, and so on. What is your mystical power? And Prabhupada said, my mystical power is this, you know, this mlechas, this people, this hippies, you know, I'd make them into happies, you know. So that's the real mystical power. You know? All these other mystical powers might or might not be there. You might or might not need them as a devotee. They're not really relevant. But a pure devotee, if he needs, he has access to it as well. Okay, I'll stop here. Maybe there are some questions, comments. Yes, Subhal Gopal Prabhu.
Smaller question regarding the prasada. So how is it when it's on the singer day? Then it's Balaram is the singer day prasada, or is it
Yeah, like Krishna, Balaram is, you could say, the general manager god. Krishna is Lila Purushottama, and Balaram is managing everything. All the rasas, Balaram is involved with Krishna, even as Ananga Manjari as well. And I wouldn't know technically, I couldn't answer this directly, but even Lord Nrsingadev, of course, has an expansion of Balaram as a companion. As an Antashesha is always there. Or also you could say of the expansions of Lord Krishna are considered to be expansions of Lord Balaram ultimately. So, but Nrsingadev is also considered to be in a special category together with Ram. Ram, Krishna, and Lord Nrsingadev are in one category. They're considered to be Swayam Bhagavan directly. So does not mean that Nrsingadev is Krishna himself directly, the same. There's a difference for sure in mood and rasa. But Nrsingadev, Ram and Krishna are in a special category. Nrsingadev is not a normal Vishnu Tattva, you could say. But you could say in a similar way, like Krishna expands himself in so many different forms, in a similar way Balaram expands himself, into all the prasadam, of all the forms of Krishna. I think that's logical, but maybe I'm wrong. Yes.
just also regarding prasada, maybe a small comment. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj used to say that we cannot eat prasada, we cannot enjoy prasada. We have to be enjoyed by prasada. Prasada is not different from Krishna, so how can we enjoy Krishna? So that's the mentality. Are we enjoying the prasada or are we being enjoyed by the prasada? Once one of his disciples went in for a preaching program, and there was one guest who was sitting and he was eating, voraciously. And then he asked him, "Oh my dear," he was a gentleman, high class. "Oh, are you eating prasad or are you being eaten by prasad? Are you enjoying prasad or being enjoyed? So are you eating prasad or being eaten by prasad?" And he was completely offended. He went to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj and complained to him. Your disciples are saying like this, and then he explained to him. It's a difficult mentality. I don't know how to.
I think the main, when we take prasadam, we should be grateful, and that's why we should always chant, the prasadam seva mantra. We're doing prasadam seva, we're serving prasadam. So that's the mood. We are very grateful. We pray before prasadam. You should not just start eating. So it's very important that we sing together, and if you come later, you sing individually. Because that sets the mind in the right consciousness. If you don't do that, then you might forget. So we have this very nice prayers by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who reminds us, this Mahaprasadam is not anything. It's avidya jal. This avidya jal. This body is it's a bag of matter. It's ignorance. It's basically avidya means forgetfulness actually. So when we identify with this body, we forget our true nature. And if we feed the body with prasadam, we can realize our true nature. So, yes. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Simhachalam Dham ki jai. Ja, braucht ihr das oder?
Nein, aber gut, wollte man das sauber machen. Und ich
Klar.
dachte sowieso, Julia kommt letztendlich und muss man hier alles.
Genau. Also ja, das muss sowieso. Wir machen auch den Railing weg.
Das kann man auch vor dem Festival, das geht dann da.
Ja. Ja, das Ding ist, es schaut nicht so schön aus.
Ist halt viel besser für die Instrumente.
Ja, ja.
Es macht viel aus, wenn du das
Ja, ja.
Harmonium
Ja, ja,
so
ich weiß,
stellst.
ich weiß. Sitzen noch Leute, damit es richtig voll wird.